Starting off at number 10 now, we have the White Cemetery. This one comes from the village of Barrington, Illinois. There lies the White Cemetery. Locals say that if you have to drive past it, don't stop. Always keep going. They say that spirits of the dead have been wandering around outside the gates there since the 1820s. Police and other reliable eyewitnesses have reported seeing apparitions that vanish before their very eyes. Phantom cars come and then go. One time, a house burned down under mysterious circumstances, and in the years since then, it keeps appearing and disappearing. Be warned though, they say you should never enter that house if you see it. When it disappears into the mist, you'll disappear with it forever. If that wasn't enough for you, there's also been reports of a woman with a lantern looking for a ride from passers-by. I'm sure you guys know by now what not to do if you see her. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Boggy Creek Monster. If you ever find yourself in a town of Fuke in Arkansas, ask them about the Boggy Creek Monster. For generations there, locals have shared stories of a creature that roams the area. They say it stands between 7 and 8 feet tall and weighs almost 300 pounds. Its chest, legs and arms are covered with thick hair. Sometimes these Sasquatch-like stories are relatively recent, but the legend of the Boggy Creek Monster goes way back. The first sightings of it came in 1834. Locals reported that a wild man was roaming the area. When groups set out to find him, he retreated back into the hills. By the 1900s, sightings around the town were becoming more frequent. By the end of the century, residents of the town reported seeing the animal more often. In 1997 alone, there were 40 sightings. In all that time, people have claimed the animal was nocturnal, but in 2000, a sighting occurred in broad daylight in the Sulphur River Wildlife Area near the town. In the years since then, the sightings have only continued, drawing visitors in who want a glimpse of the Boggy Creek Monster. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Wicked Witch of Monroe. This is the story of Hannah Cranner, born in 1783. She lived near Cutler's Farm Road in the town of Monroe, Connecticut. She was said to dabble in black magic. Now, according to accounts, nobody accused her of being a witch until her husband died. He was Captain Joseph Hovey. The tale goes that one night he went out for a walk but somehow fell off a cliff. The locals didn't believe this was possible though, and rumors spread that Hannah had somehow bewitched him, that he had lost his mind and then fallen off the cliff in a daze. They said she was a witch. Hannah used this reputation to her advantage. She would often demand free food and firewood, or else she would curse the townspeople. One woman denied her a fresh-baked pie, so Hannah cursed her so that she could never bake again. She also caught a man fishing on her property, cursed him, and he could never fish again. Over the years, she gained complete control over the locals, and that was ultimately her downfall. She had a rooster named Old Boreas, which some said was her familiar, a sort of spiritual companion that witches are supposed to have. Shortly after the rooster died, she told a neighbor that her end was also near. She said her coffin must be carried by hand to the graveyard and she must not be buried before sunset. She died the next day. It was snowing heavily. The locals decided to ignore her instructions and thought it would be easier to pull her casket across the snow on a sled. As the procession started, the coffin fell off the sled and slid all the way back down to her front door. They tried and failed again. In the end, they decided to just carry her to the graveyard like she asked for. They buried her just after sundown. When they returned to her house though, they found it engulfed in flames in the middle of the snow. Ever since then, the sight of her house and her grave has been attracting paranormal investigators, many of whom say her vengeful spirit still lives on. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Homie the Clown. In the 1990s, every school kid in Chicago had heard the story of Homie the Clown. Many of them had actually seen him. In the autumn of 1991, there were reports of a man in a white van who stalked school kids on their way home and lured them in. If that wasn't scary enough, he was also dressed as a clown. Locals named him Homie after a character from the comedy show Living Colour, but this was no laughing matter. Strange rumors began to spread about Homie. Perhaps the strangest aspect of the creepy stalker was that he seemed to be everywhere in the city. School kids all over Chicago reported seeing him. It didn't matter who you were or what school you went to, everybody avoided white vans. Nobody wanted to get caught by Homie. At one point, even the police began to investigate it, but they soon passed over the case. Sightings of Homie began to decrease by the mid-90s, and now some people are left wondering what really did happen. Was it just a made-up story that got out of hand, or did Homie get what he wanted and leave town? for now at least. Next up at number 6 now we have Lake Lanier. It didn't take me very long to find countless stories online about what some people say is Georgia's most cursed lake. They say evil has seeped into the very water there. It wraps itself around any visitors who ignore the locals' warnings. The lake is man-made, created in the 1950s to provide hydroelectricity and water supply to Atlanta. The project was plagued with problems from the beginning. Funding cuts halted work a number of times. Neighboring states bickered over water flow requirements and how the water should be used. In order to fill the lake up, the government had to move 250 families, 15 businesses, and even relocate 20 cemeteries along with the corpses. Entire towns were then submerged. They say the lake was cursed for the trouble it had caused, especially to the dead. In the years since, there have been a highly unusual number of deaths linked to the lake. They've ranged from boating accidents, drownings, to cars crashing off the road and into the water. Boats have sunk or hit invisible objects. Strong swimmers have drowned in calm conditions. Locals have reported feeling as if they were being pulled underwater by unseen hands, or feeling the air leave their lungs out of nowhere. In 2011 alone, 17 deaths occurred there, cementing it in people's minds as a very cursed lake. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Riverdale Road. This one comes from the town of Thornton in Colorado. It lies about 20 minutes north of Denver. It's not the most famous place in the world, but it's gaining a paranormal reputation for a very creepy road, Riverdale Road. It leads to a popular hilltop overlook. One night, many years ago, a jogger was running up the road. Out of nowhere, a speeding car came over the hill and crashed into the jogger. The car sped up into the darkness, leaving the jogger to die by himself on the side of the road. They say he vowed vengeance with his dying breath, and locals say his spirit returned in anger. Now he haunts the road and looks into every single car that passes by for the killer that took his life all those years ago. They say that if you park up on the road and turn off your engine and lights, he'll think you're the one who hit him. People have reported hearing sounds of footsteps running towards them, followed by angry beating on the side of their cars and handprints appearing on the windows. If this sounds like an experience you'd like, well, at least now you know where to find it. Coming in number 4 now, we have the Hoosac Tunnel. This tunnel runs through the Hoosac mountain range in western Massachusetts. It may not look like much, but it has a very bloody history. Construction began in 1851. It took 24 years to build, and during that time, around 200 workers were killed. This earned the tunnel the nickname of the Bloody Pit. Perhaps one of the most shocking incidents came in 1867. On October 17th of that year, fumes in the 1,000-foot tunnel ignited, causing an explosion that destroyed a hoist used to lower men, equipment, and supplies. The flaming parts landed on 13 men. The area was also flooded. Rescue attempts were made to get down to them, but they failed and the men were just presumed dead. That wasn't the case though. You see, months later, workers found out that some of the men had survived, and they even made a raft to try and escape the water. In the years since then, locals swear that the 13 workers haunt the tunnel now, tied to this earth by the anger of not being saved. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Devil's Chair. This one comes from the Alma Cemetery in Kansas. At first glance, it looks like any other cemetery. Gravestones, grass, nothing too creepy, but this cemetery is home to something else, something the locals call the Devil's Chair. According to legend, a farmer once owned all of the land in that area. He refused to sell his land so that it could be used as a cemetery. No matter how much people tried, he refused to give it up. Then, one day, he was mysteriously pushed in a well on the land and fell to his death. Authorities only found his body from the stench that came from the well a few days later. After the incident, locals began to call the well the Devil's Chair. They said it was cursed with the vengeful spirit of the dead farmer. The land was bought and the cemetery was built around the well. That's when the curse seemed to spread to the whole cemetery. As for the Devil's Chair, it was boarded up to stop anyone from meeting the same demise as the farmer. Legend says that those who have sat on the boards have been known to mysteriously disappear, victims of the farmer's vengeful spirit. Next up at number 2 now, we have Buck's Tomb. This one comes from Maine, where you can find the tomb of Colonel Buck. He was the founder of the town there called Buck Sport, an honored figure in many people's eyes. But this story may have a dark twist to it. On his tombstone, there appears to be the strange image of a woman's leg. Locals say that Colonel Buck once sentenced a woman to death for being a witch. As she burned, her leg rolled out of the fire, along with her final curse against him. Her son told the colonel, "Your tomb shall bear the mark of a witch's foot for all eternity." Legend says that his heirs have tried to clean the foot off the stone many times, but still it remains. They even tried to replace the monument twice, but it still keeps coming back. These days, visitors flock to see the monument in person, but a wrought iron fence keeps them from getting any closer to this creepy tombstone. And finally, number 1 now, we have Chessie. You guys have heard of Nessie, right? The Loch Ness Monster? Good. Well, I'd like you to meet Chessie. In Maryland, it's not uncommon to hear people talk about the Chesapeake Bay Monster, Chessie for short. The first sightings began in the 1930s. The crew of a military helicopter flew over the Bush River, and they claimed they saw an unknown reptilian beast in the waters below. Now, at first, people weren't sure if they just made a mistake or even made it up altogether. Over the years, though, more and more sightings of Chessie occurred. They say it looks like an anaconda or a python, serpentine, snake-like, and dark in color. One thing everyone can agree upon is that it's huge, up to 30 feet in length and as thick as a telephone pole. Interest in the beast peaked in 1982 when one family apparently videotaped Chessie from their home on Kent Island. The Smithsonian held a mini symposium on the tape and concluded that, among other things, this was absolute evidence that something large was living in Chesapeake Bay. They didn't go on to say that it was definitely Chessie, but that's only strengthened this legend. Coming up at number 10 now, we have the skunk ape. No, that's not my nickname. This is actually one of the most famous mysterious creatures said to wander from Florida to North Carolina and even Arkansas. As you guys might expect from the skunk part of the name, this thing doesn't smell great. Ever since the first sightings of it in the 1960s, people have mentioned the horrific smell of this thing. Often you can smell it before even seeing it. When you finally do, it looks like an ape, big, hairy, and running on 2 legs. For some people, the skunk ape isn't just a rumor, it's a reality. Dave Shealy is the man who established the official skunk ape research headquarters. He said there is not only 1 or 2, but 9 of these creatures living in the Florida Everglades alone. He spent most of his life trying to document them. According to Shealy, the average male skunk ape stands 6 to 7 feet tall and weighs roughly 450 pounds. Females are 5 to 6 feet tall and weigh in at about 250 pounds. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Charman. Ohio's Camp Comfort County Park is a picturesque place in California. It's also known for being home to many creepy spirits. There's a ghost of a bride wearing a bloody wedding dress, a woman on a horse reenacting her own death for eternity, and even a headless motorcyclist. However, none are as terrifying or as famous as Charman. Ever since a fire in 1948 killed a number of people there have been reports of this hideous figure wandering the area. He's said to have skin burnt to a crisp and noxious fumes pouring out of him. Some people go even further and say that this creature isn't even human at all. They say Charman is a beast, an entity that has visited people a number of times, and it always goes the same way. They say their homes are engulfed in thick black fumes that send them to sleep. Just before losing consciousness, they see Charman walking towards them. When they wake up, there will be a small fire nearby, a reminder that Charman has paid a visit. Next up at number 8 now, we have Turnbull Canyon. They say death awaits everyone at Turnbull Canyon. Located in Whittier, California, the canyon is known as a pretty dangerous place, as it is thanks to the mountain lions and rattlesnakes that call it home. Some people believe that the most dangerous thing there, though, is the paranormal activity. It's said that the Gabrielino Native Americans called this place the place of the devil. The Spanish killed many of them who refused to convert to Catholicism. Some say their tortured souls now haunt the canyon. Then, in the 19th century, members of the tribe who worked in the area reported seeing ghosts and witches in burial grounds there. The sightings became more frequent and reports started of there being a satanic cult that had taken root in the canyon. They were supposedly sacrificing children from a nearby orphanage. When locals got wind of what was happening, the cult disappeared overnight, but the reports of ghosts, creatures, and hooded figures still appear from time to time. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Night Watchers. We're moving over to Hawaii now for this one. We all know it looks like paradise, but as we've seen in our last few videos, it's no stranger to some creepy urban legends. One of them is the Night Marchers. Locals say they are ghostly apparitions that can be seen walking in formation at night, never stopping, always facing forward, and there is always the sound of a beating drum echoing out in the silence of the night. Hawaiians say they are armed spirit warriors en route to a battle. They carry old weapons and are clothed in decorated helmets and cloaks. The next question is naturally, why do they appear? Well, some say they are restless souls looking to reclaim rightful territory or replay a battle gone wrong, hoping this time they can do it right. Or perhaps it's a simple ghost tale of avenging their own deaths. The creepiest theory I heard, though, is that they're searching for an entrance to the next world. Instead of just wandering aimlessly for it like other ghosts, they do it how a soldier knows best, in a focused, methodical manner. There are signs that the Night Marchers are out on the Hawaiian Islands. They are recognized by their raised torches and repeated repeated chants. Sometimes footprints have been found, even though the night marchers are said to float a few inches off the ground. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Voodoo Queen. Louisiana is a place steeped in voodoo history. For people in New Orleans, few stories rival that of Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau. She was said to be a prestigious woman who worked as a hairdresser in the city. She chatted to every customer she had, not just for the sake of it, but to get information. Eventually, she learned the secrets of everyone in the city, man and woman, rich and poor. She used this information to manipulate her enemies through voodoo. It's said she gained the power of immortality from a demonic force known by the name of Papa Legba. She wanted to do this so that she could kill innocent beings and seek revenge on those who had wronged her. Others say that she never murdered anyone and used her voodoo skills to unite people. She also blended Catholicism and voodoo to form a religion that is still practiced in the area today. She died in 1881 at the age of 87, but the story did not end there. According to local legend, she returns to life once a year on St. John's Eve to lead the faithful in worship. If you're ever in New Orleans on that night, don't be surprised if you see a ghost of the Voodoo Queen looking for her followers. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Rougarou. We're staying in Louisiana now for this one. The Rougarou is a werewolf creature that has been sighted across French Louisiana for centuries. The creature is said to have all the familiar tropes of a werewolf: huge, leering, covered in fur, and ready to tear any human to shreds. It differs from a classic werewolf though, in that the Rougarou is said to have a genetic disorder rather than catching its disease from someone else or being cursed into it by a witch. A Rougarou is a totally normal person until one day when their condition is just turned on. Their body is enlarged and they develop an insatiable craving for raw meat. They will remain in this painful state until they complete their transformation, and there's only one way to do that: to take a bite of human flesh. Those who have seen a Rougarou describe it as huge, standing between 7 to 8 feet tall, with massive sharp teeth and deep glowing red eyes. It becomes its animal form on the night of a full moon. For many people, the Rougarou is far scarier than a typical werewolf because the person doesn't even know they are one until it's far too late. It could be your friend, your family member, it could be me, or it could even be you. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Skinwalkers. In traditional Navajo culture, the Skinwalker is a witchcraft practitioner who wears the skins of various animals. A Skinwalker can morph into a number of different creatures, including coyotes, wolves, bears, crows, and owls. In the past century or so, those outside of the Navajo people have also reported seeing Skinwalkers. They've been described as half-human monstrosities who run on 2 legs at insanely fast speeds. One woman claimed that a Skinwalker appeared on a Navajo reservation land. It ran alongside her car at 60 miles per hour, darted in front, and then disappeared into the night. They're often said to let out a screeching howl of laughter as they run circles around terrified people. Sightings like this have led many people to become interested in Skinwalkers and want to interview Navajo tribes people to find out more about them. The problem is, there is a deep superstition among the Navajo people when it comes to talking about Skinwalkers. Many of the elders believe it's not good to talk or even hear about Skinwalkers, otherwise you will attract them to you. Let's hope we don't do that after discussing them in this video. Next up at number 3 now, we have Stowe Lake. Stowe Lake lies in Golden Gate Park in California. It's said to be home to a ghost that not only appears to visitors but can also be summoned by them. According to locals, the ghost of Stowe Lake was a mother whose baby fell into the lake. Now they say that she can be summoned by standing on the edge of the lake and saying exactly these words: white lady, I have your baby. You will have to repeat it 3 times and then she will appear. The best place to do this is said to be next to the Pioneer Women and Children statue. That in itself is said to be quite a spooky statue as it changes expressions at night. If she deems you worthy enough, then she will appear to you and immediately ask you for her baby. If you say that you have the baby, she will haunt you until the day you die. If you say you don't, she'll drag you down to the lake herself. Coming at number 2 now, we have the Legend of Chloe. This is said to be the ghost of a girl that haunts Myrtle's plantation in LA. One day, a teacher took a picture with one of her students on a field trip there. It has since become famous among the paranormal community. Behind them there appears to be the ghost of a girl standing in the window. She appears to be looking directly into the camera. The owners say this is Chloe, and it's not the first time that she's been seen. The picture was sent to the Society of Physical Research in England, founded in 1882, claimed to be the oldest and most prestigious paranormal research group in the world. They found nobody had tampered with or edited the photograph, leading to many people saying this is proof of Chloe's existence. The photograph has now been sent around the whole world, always with a request for an explanation, but so far none have emerged. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Devil Man of Algiers. We're returning again to Louisiana for this one. Algiers is the oldest neighborhood in New Orleans. This story dates back to 1938, when reports of a man terrorizing couples spread around the city. When asked to describe the man, some details were disputed, but one thing everyone agreed on was that this man was undoubtedly, categorically, the devil. He was described as having eyes like a chicken, with bright pink star-shaped ears and long black horns. He also rode on thin air and shape-shifted while announcing himself as the devil. The most common reports involved him terrorizing bars, attacking women, and appearing before local couples. People who saw the Devil Man say they always felt a sense of oncoming death or dread, that they even saw their lives flash before their very eyes. Perhaps the most scary story comes from a young couple. They said as they were traveling home one evening, a strange person tried to stop their car. They slowed the car and asked what he wanted. He asked for a ride to a nearby town. The couple felt uncomfortable though, and so they politely declined. Later, as they drove down the highway, they saw the same man walking along the side of the road. They drove past him, but after just 10 minutes, there he was again, walking by the side of the road. Again, he asked them to stop and requested a ride, and again they refused. When they saw him again, he changed into the devil before their own eyes. They sped off again, and then there he was, this time riding a brown horse. They rushed to tell the police, who went to investigate. The police saw him and requested that he stops. When he didn't, they fired shots into him. He jumped off the horse and sprayed the bullets back at them, laughing and rubbing his hairy hands together. He was brought to jail, where he quickly slipped out of his cell and into New Orleans legends. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Murfreesboro Mud Monster. In 1973, a young couple went for a romantic drive near the town of Murfreesboro, Illinois. They parked up by the river. Later on, they heard a piercing roar, which they described as sounding like an eagle shrieking into a microphone. They quickly turned off the radio and scanned the area. Another horrific shriek came and the bush in front of them shook. They turned on the car lights to see a creature that would forever be burned into their memories. It was massive, wet, hairy, and covered in mud. Its skin was almost translucent, as if it was an albino. For the next 2 weeks, it terrorized people in the town. Reports of the 7-foot-tall swamp monster kept increasing until one day it just disappeared. After that, there have only been a few more reports of the Murfreesboro Mud Monster since. At the time, the local police chief said, "A lot of things in life are unexplained, and this is another one. We don't know what the creature is, but we do believe what these people saw was real." Moving on to number 9 now, we have the Little People's Village. In the woods of Connecticut, near the town of Middlebury, you can find the Little People's Village, crumbling remains of tiny houses and structures that locals say were built for fairies. The story goes that many years ago, a man and his wife were living peacefully in Middlebury when she started seeing small fairy folk in the woods around their home. She demanded that her husband build them a tiny village, and so that's exactly what he did. Using real concrete and mortar, he built the fairies these tiny houses complete with walkways and streets. As the village grew, he suffered a price. People say that he began to hear the fairies' voices in his head, which eventually drove him to madness and then suicide. Now, they say the crumbling ruins of the Little People's Village is haunted by the spirits of them, or even the ghosts of the people they drove insane. You can still visit the ruins today, and even sit in the throne that was carved at the request of the king of the Little People. However, legend says the seat is now cursed, and that if you sit in it, you will be dead within 7 years. Locals will show you how to get to the village of the Little People, but many also warn that if you linger there too long, you will hear the voices of the Little People, and you too will be plunged into insanity. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Kushtaka. These are mythical shape-shifting creatures found in the stories of Native Americans in southeastern Alaska. The name roughly translates to land otter man. The story says that these creatures will shift between the human form and the otter form at will. They are cruel creatures who take pleasure in tricking sailors to their deaths. If they're not at sea, they live in rivers and deploy a very creepy tactic tactic to attract their prey. The kushtaka are said to imitate the cries of a human baby or the screams of a woman in order to lure the victims to the river. Once there, the kushtaka either kill the person by tearing them to shreds or turn them into a kushtaka themselves. Legend says that they can be warded off by using copper, urine, dogs or fire. Some stories do tell of benevolent kushtaka who will help people, but many feel it's simply not worth the risk to approach them if they ever do hear its cries in the Alaskan forest. Next up at number 7 now we have the spectre moose. In Maine, people have been spotting a particular moose for over 100 years. This one stands out though, as they say it's spectral, a ghost moose if you will. It's also huge, standing some 10 to 15 feet high. It was first seen in the early 1900s when locals described it as a huge moose with a ghostly, dirty white color and an enormous set of antlers. The coat of the animal is sometimes described as glowing faintly. The spectre moose was said to have an extremely acute sense of smell and hearing, as well as the ability to appear or disappear at will and to phase through solid objects. Hunters who came across it said they could never line up properly for a shot, as the moose would just blink in and out of existence before their very eyes. In 1938, a hunter said he saw it standing among a herd of other moose. Mises? Not sure. It was stood with 2 other large males, but it made them look like dwarves. He would have thought it was just a normal, humongous moose if it wasn't for the strange white glow around its body. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Betty Grease. In Michigan, on the beaches of Lake Superior, is a place where the sand is said to sing. Local legend says that a musical voice emanates from the sand, the voice of a Native American maid who lost her love to the Great Lakes and still calls to him from the shore when visitors play the sand. How exactly do you play the sand? Well, they say the sand can be made to sing by pressing down on it with the palm of your hand or a piece of bark. It loses its magical properties though when removed from the beach. I wasn't too sure what to make of this one at first, but I've seen a few videos on YouTube now and it definitely makes a very strange noise. Perhaps you guys check it out and see what you make of it. Next up at number 5 now we have the hauntings at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. This historic hotel is over 90 years old and has hosted some of the biggest stars in Hollywood over the years. The 12-story high building has 300 guest rooms and 63 suites, some of which are said to be haunted. 2 of the ghosts are actually famous ghosts. Montgomery Clift is said to haunt room 928, the room he stayed in while filming From Here to Eternity. People say he moves around the occupants' luggage, while others have said they've seen him in the hallways rehearsing lines for his movie or playing the trumpet. The other celebrity haunting is someone a lot more famous, Marilyn Monroe. She is said to haunt the full-length mirror that was once in her suite. Since she stayed in the hotel, the mirror has been relocated from her room, but the hauntings still follow it. People report seeing the ghostly apparition of Marilyn standing over their shoulder. Some people might like that, definitely not me. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the bus to nowhere. This one comes from Pennsylvania. Some say that this state is home to a bus that goes nowhere. It picks up hopeless people and keeps them on it forever unless they are able to shake out of its trance. The bus is said to have no displays, no route number and no destination. It only stops for people who want to leave where they are but have no destination in mind. Philadelphians often say they've seen it winding through the city streets. Some people also call it the wandering bus or simply zero. People say that once you're on the bus, you sit like everyone else, staring out of the window, wrapped in your own thoughts, desperate to get away from whatever pain and despair is in your life. You can pull the cord anytime when you're ready to disembark, but be warned. Legend says that time does not move the same on the bus to nowhere. Your trip could have lasted minutes, days, months, or in some cases, years. The only silver lining is that when the passengers finally do disembark, they find themselves exactly where they're supposed to be. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Snallygaster. This is a mythical dragon-like beast said to inhabit central Maryland. It was first described by German immigrants who called it the Schnellergeist, which translates to quick ghost. It's been described as being half bird, half reptile, and with a strange metallic beak lined with razor-sharp teeth. Some even say it has octopus-like tentacles. It swoops down silently from the sky and carries its human victims off to its den, where it then sucks them dry of blood. Newspaper reports from February and March 1909 describe encounters between local residents and a beast with enormous wings, a long pointed bill, claws like steel hooks, and an eye in the center of of its forehead. They said its screech sounded like a locomotive whistle. Now, other than the humans it hunts, the Snallygaster is also said to have one mortal enemy, the Deweo. The Deweo is reported to be a mammalian biped that looks like a wolf but stands like a human. It's been reported all over Maryland, and locals have said they've seen vicious battles between the two creatures. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Huggin' Molly. You might think her name sounds quite nice. Everyone needs a hug from time to time, probably not from Molly. Generations of people from Alabama have grown up with this very creepy legend. They said Molly is a giant ghost, at least 7 feet tall, who wanders the streets of Abbeville, Alabama. Late at night, she can be seen dragging her long black skirt as she goes. If you see her, run, because if she sees you, she will chase you and she will get you. Once she does, she picks you up with her huge arms and gives you the tightest hug of your life while screaming in your ear. They say the horrible sound she makes never leaves you. There have been no reports of Huggin' Molly ever killing someone, but her attacks are enough to strike fear into the hearts of everyone around. And finally at number 1, we have the Carter brothers. In New Orleans in the 1930s, a young girl ran into a police station begging for help. She said that 2 local businessmen, John and Wayne Carter, had been keeping her hostage and feeding off her blood. She showed them the cuts on her wrist, not quite enough to kill her, but just enough to extract blood from. The police rushed to the apartment to find 4 other women tied to chairs with their wrists slit in a similar fashion. In another room, they also found 12 bodies that had been drained of their blood. The police staked the place out and waited for the men to return. When they did, it took 8 police officers to hold them down and restrain them. Their strength seemed superhuman. The pair were executed for their crimes and buried in a sealed tomb. Years later, another member of the Carter family died. They opened up the tomb to lay them to rest and found that the bodies of John and Wayne Carter were gone. No remains, no clothes, no trace that they have ever been there at all. New Orleans became gripped with the legend of these vampire brothers who could escape death itself. To this day, many sightings of the brothers have still been reported, especially around the apartment building that they once called home. Or perhaps they still do. They've just learned their lesson to keep things more hidden.